Hi there everybody, it's Steve Carson. We're here on the bow of the Vagabond. Another fantastic, almost record-breaking trip. I think the yellowtail fishing is even better. At 3 o'clock, they charge the boat. Hi there everybody, Steve Carson here, talking about long-range fishing here. It's the early October, probably the best time of the year between now and New Year's. If you're not fishing, you need to plan to get out on a trip next year at this time because it's just been crazy fishing. Very, very good tuna fishing. A couple different areas, both at the Ridge and Alijos Rocks, and some spots a little bit closer to home. So some of the 6-day trips have been able to get into the very, very nice quality tuna. They've been typically running anywhere from 40 to about 80 pounds typically. Sometimes fish up to 100. Occasionally out of Alijos, they've been seeing fish up to about 150. Some days, the sharks are around at Alijos, and that biggest tuna that you've ever hooked in your life, Mr. Shark is gonna win that one. So you just kind of have to be ready. Keep a good attitude if that happens, because you know what, it's nature. We're just a part of it. So, but the tuna fishing has been from good to very good. And the Wahoo fishing, like Wahoo fishing is, has also ranged from very good to none, because what happens with Wahoo is once they start to feel a lot of pressure, they either stop biting or they stop biting anything other than very, very light tackle with live bait. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, and it becomes a little bit harder to land them. But the Wahoo fishing has been at least better than last year, that's for sure. And we're knocking on wood that it holds up. Yellowtail fishing has just been, the steady, the anchor, the rock. Pretty much anytime the fish aren't biting, the yellowtail are biting. And also the yellowtail are biting a lot closer to home, so that quite frequently on the last day of a trip or the first day of a trip, which in some years are travel days, there's some very, very good yellowtail fishing to be had on the Mexican coast. So really, really a lot of cool stuff going on. Also, some dorado showing up under the kelp patties. Don't forget, on your long-range trips, dorado count as 5 in your limit. So don't get too excited about keeping a whole bunch of dorado. Just understand how the math works. The crew can explain all that to you. Sometimes the math gets a little bit deep. But when you're live bait fishing and there's not 100-pound tuna around, if you're talking about dorado, if you're talking about Wahoo, if you're talking about school-sized tuna, again, those 40, 50, 60 pounders, you don't need super fancy giant Penn Internationals, super high-speed reels like you'd use for jigging for Wahoo. Your standard live bait rig, 40-pound test live bait rig, and this is a Penn Fathom 25 narrow. It is a 2-speed. We're going to talk about Wahoo fishing in a minute. You don't really need a 2-speed for Wahoo, but guess what happens? When you're fishing for Wahoo, a lot of times tuna will show up, and then you do want a 2-speed. Sometimes if the tuna are running a little bit bigger, I will switch to the Penn Fathom 30, which is, you're gonna kind of have to visualize, about another 3/4 of an inch wider, and more importantly, holds about 125 more yards of line. So if you get into those tuna that are just sub 100 pounds, that Fathom 30 extra line capacity is nice. Again, don't need a fancy rod. You can use a 7-foot, 7.5, 8-foot rod, whatever your favorite is. I like an 8-foot rod just because I like to be able to cast, but it's not an absolute necessity as long as you pick a good lively bait and get him a little bit of ways away from the boat, let him swim away. And again, remember, you want your line test to be just about as close as you can get to the middle of the rod's line rating. So if you got a 40-pound test reel, then you want a rod that's rated something like 20 to 50, somewhere in that range. When you're live bait fishing, you want nothing too stiff. You don't want a thick jigging rod. But again, you don't need to be overly fancy. The way I also like to rig up most of my bait rigs is you fill the reel about 3/4 of the way up with braid, and then usually I like the braid to be 1-pound test heavier than whatever the top shot is. So if I'm going to use a 40-pound top shot, I'm using 50-pound braid. And then, like I say, I fill the reel up to about 3/4 of the way full, leave just enough room for a 50-yard top shot amount of filament. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, I like the extra short top shots, but that long top shot will really help you end up with more fish in the boat. Number one, it's easier to cast than the braid. Also, when you get in a tangle with your fellow angler, it's a lot more tangle friendly. The crew is going to be able to more easily get you untangled from your friends. And should the fish dive under the boat and rub you on the bottom of the boat, the monofilament is a lot more abrasion resistant than the braid is. Plus, if the line gets completely wrecked, it's a lot cheaper to replace than the braid is. So a lot of good reasons for a 50-yard top shot. If you want to use, a 25-yard top shot or 20-foot top shot, it's on you. Your mileage may vary. But again, your basic 40-pound rig, you don't need anything fancy for live bait fishing, especially for wahoo. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of live bait fishing for wahoo. Live bait fishing for wahoo, you can't use your plain monofilament line, and you can't even use your plain fluorocarbon leader like you would for tuna. You gotta have some kind of special stuff. And the two basic things that most people will use is either a wire leader or a heavy fluorocarbon leader. And the way that I like to do it, again, there's a lot of room for personal preference, is about a 24-inch titanium wire. I think it looks like that. Regular single strand stainless will work, but what happens is with your regular single strand stainless, as soon as you get a bite, whether it's from a wahoo or for a little 5-pound skipjack, your wire is going to be all bent up. And your titanium is much more flexible and even has a little bit of stretch. The downside is it's quite a bit more expensive, so you kind of have to understand that going in. Also, I like to use crimps on my titanium. A lot of people do use different figure 8 and other type of bends rather than the crimps. Again, personal preference. A nice small dark, that's I think a number 4 owner dark ring, and that is a number 10 owner Gorilla J hook. And I like the wire to be either the same or 1 pound test heavier than whatever the Top Shot is. So this happens to be 40-pound titanium, and I'm using it with 40-pound test monofilament Top Shot. It's perfect. And obviously, the wahoo is not going to be able to bite through that. Now, sometimes, even as thin as this stuff is, the wahoo still won't bite it. You wish they would, but they won't. So then you're going to the 130-pound fluorocarbon. And again, about 24 inches long, number 4 owner dark ring on one end, and number 10 owner Mutu circle hook on the other hand. And yeah, I do crimp them. You can do a tie if you want to. I think that the knots in the 130-pound fluorocarbon are a little bit bulky. When the wahoo are super picky, even that amount of bulk will spook them a little bit, but you can tie them if you want to. And then the trick there is, even though it's 130-pound fluorocarbon, wahoo gets a good chomp on that 130-pound fluorocarbon, it's gone. He's gonna bite right through it. So what you have to do, you make your cast. As soon as you feel anything, you feel like you're getting a bite, put the reel in gear, start turning the handle. Hopefully what will happen is that circle hook will slide to the corner of the wahoo's mouth, and it will hold together just enough to get that wahoo in the boat for you. If he gets a good bite on it, you know what? Guess what? Your hook is gonna be gone. Now, another big secret when you're fishing with wire leaders for wahoo. Okay, a lot of you are experienced tuna anglers, experienced yellowtail anglers. You know how to do it. You made your cast. You get your bait out there. You're like, okay, ooh, my bait's scared. You can feel him. Bait's running. Oh, I'm getting a bite. Ah. Oh, he's gone. And you reel in, and your bait is cut in half. Looks like it was cut in half with a razor blade. You blew it. What you want to visualize is the way the wahoo feeds is he zooms through, he bites the bait in half. Now he knows he's killed it. He eats the bottom half. He knows he's killed it. He's not in a hurry. So visualize in your mind that wahoo is now going to swim in a lazy, about a 30-foot circle and come back for the other half. So you're there waiting, and all of a sudden it's going to feel like a calico bass. Picked up your bait and kind of moving off slowly. That's the wahoo. So then put it in gear, turn the handle. By the way, with wahoo fishing, even with live bait, you never set the hook like a TV fisherman. You always just turn the handle. Now, another really good secret that applies when you've been in a spot and you've been anchored for a while. The wahoo will be maybe around the boat, but there will almost always be a couple, 3 wahoo directly underneath the boat, kind of like puppy dogs, looking up from underneath the boat, waiting to be fed. So instead of throwing your bait out there, where the wahoo may or may not be, or your bait may get bitten by tuna. Not that that's bad, but when you want a wahoo, you want a wahoo. You literally use about a 2-ounce egg sinker on your line, walk up to the stern and drop it overboard. Just don't even try to cast, just drop it straight down, because that wahoo is waiting under the boat, and you'll be about maybe 10 or 15 feet down, and all of a sudden you'll get a bite, because that wahoo that was under the boat kind of zooms right out and bites it. When there's a lot of small tuna that maybe you don't want to catch, and every time you make a cast, you're getting a small tuna, when you know there's wahoo around, a lot of times that is a really, really good trick. So wahoo fishing has been very good this year. Is it going to hold up all the way to the end of December? We don't know, but we're hoping that it will. We'll see you on the water.